You're listening to the JustDjango Podcast. My name is Matthew Frere. I'm the host of the show and creator of JustDjango. In this first season, I'm having conversations with individual creators, founders, and entrepreneurs that are using Django to run profitable online businesses and side projects. This episode's guest is Eric Vanular. Eric is an indie hacker, software developer, consultant, and creator of Collective Energy, a community for individuals working together to combat climate change. He also created Enviro.work, which is an affiliated green jobs board, and he built that using Django. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
I took a look at your website, and I was very interested in the fact that you studied applied science in engineering, or is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very fancy way of saying engineering. And specifically, I studied mechanical engineering with a specialization in clean energy.
Okay, yeah, because here I studied industrial engineering, and just remembering from all the types of engineering that there was, I'd never heard of applied science in engineering, so I thought maybe that's some sort of hybrid of like we have Bachelor of Science in like mathematics, for example, so maybe that's some sort of hybrid. So you did pure mechanical.
Yes, so mechanical engineering, and then as I mentioned, the specialization on that was clean energy. So interestingly, when I was in university, I actually originally thought that my profession was going to be something along the lines of clean energy developer. And then prior to that, I thought it was going to be basically like rocket scientist. So something focused around propulsion technology. So that was the original impetus for me going into mechanical engineering. And then my desire to contribute to sustainability led me towards clean energy engineering. And then my proficiency at software led me towards software engineering.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask. So in terms of the format or like structure of the degree, is the specialization in clean energy a postgrad, or is that actually part of the undergrad?
So that was more just tailoring the courses that I took within the undergrad degree to clean energy. And so I hit a certain amount of requirements around, energy systems design, sustainability studies, things like that.
Okay, that's interesting. When it comes to the applied sciences, would it include any kind of data science related courses or modules that you can add into that, or is it just really a fancy word?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally it does include the foundations of those kind of things because, I have a pretty solid, statistical foundation, took several courses in statistics, several in data processing, essentially, programming with MATLAB or R, more of those like academic type languages, and using it for, basically like mechanical systems analysis.
Okay. So did you do anything like CAD or other kinds of drawing software as well?
Yes, at some point, although I will say I was near the bottom of my class in CAD. But,
Same, yeah.
Our artistical endeavors are not my forte. But it certainly included, a pretty wide breadth of skills and attributes.
Yeah, I find engineering's good in that sense. It kind of puts you or opens a lot of different doors that you can explore. You don't have to, if you do mechanical engineering, you don't have to become a mechanical engineer. It kind of prepares you for a couple different career trajectories like software and data science, and obviously specializing further in mechanical engineering.
Yeah, and honestly, Matt, that is the main reason why I went into engineering was sort of as I know I'm good at math and science, but I don't know exactly what I want to do with them or how to utilize those skills in a meaningful way. And so I might as well just go and start leveling up those skills some more, and then see what doors open for me. And so, as I mentioned, I explored a number of different avenues and doors, ranging from, clean energy project design to, astrophysics, and even finance at a certain point, but
Right.
basically settled on the fact that people seem to appreciate my skill sets the most with regards to building software and helping them in the digital domain.
Right. Yeah. I think I could probably say the same applies to me because engineering as a whole, I would say, is more just about problem solving. So most of the modules that you take on, or at least in my experience, aren't really. I don't want to say they're not specialized, but they're more focused on making you a general problem solver than making you really good at, like, we don't have physics, for example, as a subject, and I believe even if we did, you wouldn't be a qualified astrophysicist after it. Like, you get what I'm saying?
I totally do. It's a general framework for being able to problem solve.
Yeah.
And if I look back at what I studied, I would say 95% of it has gone into the ether of my brain. But what remains is the knowledge that I can learn anything,
Hmm.
and being able to set up frameworks for learning things and understanding problems, breaking them down.
Yeah, I have pretty much the same opinion when it comes to it. But your reasoning for taking up mechanical engineering definitely sounds better than mine because I just did an aptitude test and the results were like, yeah, you pretty much are 100% match for industrial engineering. And I had no idea what that meant. Uh, but it was the same as you. I'm good at maths, good at science. Okay, let's go into that. And then halfway through, just by chance, we took up Python as one of the modules, and from there it was kind of like, okay, I need to go down this route because that's the only thing I really could see as a future I would enjoy. Definitely not being a systems engineer working on CAD and, oh no.
I think actually my first exposure to programming almost turned me off of it
Mm,
because as I mentioned, it was more academic focused, right, with MATLAB and R, and using those languages essentially to create very fancy lab reports for the
yeah.
mechanical classes that I had. And the truth is, I really didn't enjoy it very much. It was more done out of necessity to pass this course or that course. And so, some of my friends who were in the course with me, were much better at it than I was, just because I didn't have a passion for it at all. And
Right.
really, where I sort of came into my own in terms of software was after graduating and in my first job. I was working with KPMG doing consulting, more focused around technology. And what I found really quickly is that I was actually able to help them through the use of technology, and specifically with Python, in processing a lot of their data. And so that is sort of where I fell into this rabbit hole of software, and just went deeper and deeper.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I remember doing R, and there were at the time there were talks about what is better, Python or R. Luckily, we didn't have to go into MATLAB. I understand that's just kind of purely academic, but that's interesting. So you were really you were taking those skills and applying them more in a business setting than an academic setting.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I actually never saw myself becoming a software engineer by trade. I was always interested in business challenges and how technology could be applied to helping improve businesses and helping improve the world, which is where the
Mm.
sustainability slant comes in. Um, and it was always kind of like at a higher level of trying to understand how to improve processes. And I mean, initially, I guess it started just with very advanced Excel
Yeah, yeah,
lookups and formulas, and then started reaching the limitations of Excel and saying, okay, well, I could probably do this with Python.
right. So I'm sure then you were kind of going down what's it, pandas and NumPy,
Exactly.
Matplotlib, that sort of avenue.
Exactly, and in a very non-structured way, right? Just kind of pulling those
Right,
tools off the shelf if and when they became useful to me.
Right. So then, and it's kind of a logical step that from there, at least how I found it learning those online, was that you get kind of prompted to go into machine learning. And I see that's something that you've really outlined quite a lot on your website, is that that's something that you do quite a lot. How did you go into that set of skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, at the time, and I would say even now, machine learning and data science were kind of the hot girl on the block, right? Not that I wanted to follow the trend, but naturally that's what the market was pulling out of me, because I started independently consulting with businesses. And what I heard from them was, hey, we really need help with data analysis, data science, and we're starting to look into ML and AI. And in a lot of contexts, those are just buzzwords. But in other contexts, there was real work to be done. And I don't mean it in terms of like building really complicated neural networks, just simple things that you can pull off the shelf, right? With scikit-learn, like doing very, very simple, like even regression analysis to get the, I guess, like 80% of results from the 20% of effort.
Yes. That's actually quite impressive, because you basically you were getting these, I would say, requests to implement these sort of solutions, and if that required that you had to understand machine learning, you were just approaching it with the mindset of, well, I know how to learn, so I just have to learn this right now. Whereas I feel like a lot of other people's approaches would be more, I need to become a machine learning engineer, and really not so much focus on implementing it in business settings, but kind of just learn as much as you can about machine learning. But your approach, I find, is actually a lot better.
Yeah, I always wanted to be really pragmatic about the way that I learned to use software, because what you just highlighted is a very common hole that you can fall into, which is that kind of imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough to do machine learning right now because I don't have a advanced degree in it and I don't know everything there is to know about it. And to some extent, that is propagated more by the kinds of technical job interviews that you see out there, where it's highly whiteboard oriented, and they're kind of just prodding at the limitations of your academic knowledge.
Yes.
Which, I mean, most of the time that's pretty misguided approach, because you're never actually going to be using advanced machine learning algorithms in a business context. And, the cold, hard truth is that most businesses just aren't ready for the kind of, hard-hitting data science that they want to use. Most of them would be better served, with the simplest, kind of regression analysis. And they don't have their data in a state where, it's capable of doing the kinds of things that they want to do.
That is such an interesting answer. I feel like I want to frame that answer, because the idea of businesses not being ready feels like something I might not hear that ever from people. It's kind of like a truth that people don't want to talk about.
It's something that is swept under the rug, and I've kind of shone the light on the full organizational spectrum of how that comes to be, and here's what happens. So an organization at the top level will have generally. Not all of these, but maybe most of the time, a non-technical board or executive group that's hearing things like machine learning, AI, data science is the future, and then pushing those requirements and constraints downwards towards their tech team and saying, hey, we need to be leveraging this stuff. The tech team says, okay, I just want to keep my job. So, we don't have anyone with so-called machine learning expertise. And I would contend that there's a very, very limited set of people in the world who actually do have so-called expertise in machine learning, because it's such a fast evolving field. And for the most part, it's fairly new as well. And so they go out into the market and say, okay, we need ML expertise. when in reality, that's not actually going to serve the business needs, the best that they can. And ultimately, the way that I frame it is, what are you trying to predict, right? Because that's really what modern machine learning and data science boils down to a lot of the time. What do you want to predict with a higher degree of accuracy? What future do you want to know better, and then make decisions around that knowledge of the future?
Yeah, that's interesting. That sounds pretty accurate. It's basically high level executives are hearing buzzwords, and those buzzwords could be not only machine learning. I think blockchain is the same thing. There's so many, and then there becomes this false expectation on developers. But you touched on something that's quite interesting, which is the idea that not many people have actually got expertise in this case machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true, and kind of the abstraction that these libraries, for example, something like scikit-learn has done is, in my opinion, it's allowed developers to learn an API, not necessarily machine learning concepts or data science concepts. Or maybe you disagree. Do you think that developers actually need to have an understanding of real machine learning concepts or algorithms and data science principles?
I think it certainly helps to have the understanding behind the underpinnings of how some of the algorithms work. But the future that I envision coming to fruition is one in which every developer is capable of just making an API call to get their off-the-shelf data science functionality, right? And that's essentially the point that we're nearing now. Which is you don't need to be able to stand up your own machine learning model and operationalize it and productionize it when you can just make an API call for cents, right? You look at something like OpenAI with their new language model GPT-3, and it's just an API call away, right? It's pretty accessible from any developer standpoint. To get this state-of-the-art language model. And so I see the convergence of data science and traditional software engineering into being, machine learning is just another tool in the kit of your average, maybe back-end, software developer, and being able to just pull that off the shelf. That being said, there's always going to be a market for machine learning engineers and data engineers. But for your average, software company, it doesn't need to be a core competency, right? Unless you're like Google or someone who's marketing it as their product.
Yes, 100%. I was about to say, like the Google Maps API is a pretty good example of that most businesses don't need to go reinvent the wheel. You literally have an API. I mean, their distance calculation API is amazing. It's literally just send an array of coordinates and it can give you the traveling salesman problem, spit it out.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy. Ultimately, I think where the future challenges are going to lie in this domain is in the data engineering itself, setting up the infrastructure required to get the data into those kinds of APIs and get them out in an efficient way. So, building those ETL flows and building the plumbing around it that's necessary to make it work for a business context.
So that's why you're saying that most businesses aren't ready, because they don't have the data essentially.
Yes. So I see data science as this kind of pyramid, right? And at the bottom of the pyramid are these foundational infrastructure pieces, right? Do you have your data in a state where it's capable of being analyzed with any kind of meaningful outcome? Do you have the data pipelines required to get data, succinctly and efficiently from one place to another? And for most businesses, the answer is no. And so they tend to want to just throw, algorithms at the problem. But it's that, typical, you'll hear it a million times, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. No, I have a friend who who I wouldn't call him any kind of machine learning engineer, but he works with data now and then, and he always complains about the cleaning process of data, and that really that's what he spends 80% of his time on, and the real, I'd say, solution that, or the output that the business wants, is maybe 10 to 20% of the time.
I would even say it's more skewed than that.
Wow.
I would say it's more along the lines of like 90% cleaning and 10% actual analysis. Because like I said, it's quite easy to just pull an algorithm off the shelf, right? Like that is the least of your problems when you're working in a data science context. That if you've gotten to that point and you're feeding in coherent data that is getting you a real meaningful outcome, then you've already done all of the hard part. And from there, you're laughing because getting data organized and clean is a consistently underestimated task across every business, and even those that have done it before.
That's so interesting. Okay, wow. I mean, it sounds like we could talk about this forever. I have to ask, so I'm pretty sure you're gonna give me the answer that you learned it when you needed to, but so how did this trajectory of you learning software development take you into learning Django?
Yeah, great question. And your suspicion is accurate. What happened was I was working with data, doing this kind of so-called data plumbing, and was working with a client that needed to surface that in a web context. And so I looked at that and said, okay, I have fairly limited web development experience, but I know Python pretty well now because I've used it extensively in this data domain. And looking at the landscape of options and tools that I could pull off the shelf, Django is a fairly, bells and whistles included type of framework, similar to, Ruby on Rails, but I didn't have any kind of expertise with Ruby on Rails. It's tried and tested. There's, 1,000,001 answers on Stack Overflow for every kind of problem you could run into with Django. And so naturally, it was just the quickest and easiest way for me to, surface this data science work that I had done in a web environment and get something up and running and on the internet.
Yep. This kind of confirms a suspicion I've been having lately. I wouldn't call it a trend. Well, I guess it's a trend, but I believe if you're a Django developer, if you're in the space of consulting, half of your potential clients are not even companies that are working with any kind of web development tools. They're working with data because of the exact reason that you just said. If you're working with data, chances are, and I mean working with it not in Excel, chances are that you're using something like Python or R. If you're using R, I feel sorry for you, but if you're using Python, you probably are using pandas. And the easiest way to transition from that into and make it some sort of accessible web app is Django, in my experience.
Yeah. So I actually tried the other, I guess I would say leading, Python framework as well. So initially I just had these kind of fragile, like you said, like pandas based, analysis scripts, working with a lot of like Jupyter notebooks. And so I said, what's the fastest way to get something that is coming out of these scripts online? Well, I mean, naturally tutorials kind of led me towards Flask, right? Because it's quite easy to set up an API in Flask. And the obstacle that I ran into with Flask is it's everything, every micro decision you have to make yourself, right?
Yes.
And you have to re-architect, the way that you're interacting with your database, the way that you're writing your views, your templates, everything. So it just took a lot of mental bandwidth to be able to make those decisions. And like I said, I'm not a web developer by trade. So, I didn't know the right way to approach each of those challenges. And I liked that Django made a lot of those decisions for me. It was opinionated. And I knew that people who had more experience than me in the web domain had already made those mistakes before, and that I could stand on top of the shoulders of giants, so to speak, by using Django.
Right. Yeah, so pretty much for people that want to be pragmatic or just want to have the problem solved, you want to think as little as possible, essentially. Like if there's something that has been proven to be working, then go with that option, which is why Django is ultimately a better decision than Flask in that situation, because you just want to get something up and not have to worry about other technicalities.
Exactly. And the problem that I see time and time again from software developers is they're chasing the sexiest new thing to come out.
Yes.
Right. And, recently that's been all these different JavaScript front end frameworks. Right. And you're jumping from technology to technology because that is the new standard, so to speak. And if you're still using Django or Ruby on Rails, then those are antiquated. Those are 2008 technologies. But the truth is, you look at the market and you see the most successful businesses. How were their MVPs built? Well, I would say a good amount of them were Ruby on Rails, and a good amount of them were Django. And going and re-architecting everything from scratch just leads to a lot of time spent on development and not a lot of time spent on solving the actual business problem behind it all.
Right.
So, I mean, time and time again, I always want to reframe the conversation as, why are we doing this to begin with? We're doing it to solve a business problem and come up with a business solution. It's not to, use the state-of-the-art bleeding edge technology in the sexiest way possible to impress other developers, because ultimately the users of that technology don't care as long as it solves their problem.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I hope more software developers listen to this and kind of adopt that sort of mindset, because, I mean, it makes your life a lot easier anyway. Then you don't have to learn all these new technologies, especially JavaScript. But you actually, your website, your personal website, is built with Gatsby, am I right?
That's right. Yep.
So in that situation, I mean, I can understand building something really simple that you just want pages to load quickly, pre-rendered, and having the Jamstack for that kind of situation, I think is fine. And it's a really easy development experience, I feel. So why would you have decided, or why did you decide to use Gatsby in that situation over something like Django?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is my personal site is just static content sitting there, right? It's not an application in any sense of the word, right? Like people go on and why are people visiting my site? It's to just find out more information about me and to read things that I've written. And so both of those things are static content. So I can essentially just serve it behind a CDN and get it very, very simply out to market. 10 years ago, it might have just been a single HTML file. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So the reason why I reached for Gatsby was, quite frankly, because I found, an open source repository, that was based around a personal site, and tweaked it to my own liking. And why did I do that? Well, because it took me a day to get a site up and running, and it didn't take me a month to make a personal site. I think it's absurd when people over-engineer personal sites because, again, they're not applications, right? They're just simply your, public face to the internet. And
Definitely.
anything more than a couple days spent on a personal site, well, quite frankly, you'd be better off going and using WordPress.
Yep. Okay, so one of the projects you've kind of launched is enviro.work, which is essentially correct me if I'm wrong, a job board for, I'd say, more environmentally conscious positions.
Yep, that's right. So essentially it's a jobs board for sustainability oriented jobs.
Okay, so that's sustainability. Okay.
Yeah.
And that project is built with Django.
That is entirely with Django.
Okay. So then maybe walk through why Django in that sort of situation.
Well, I saw a jobs board as being, not a new engineering challenge, right? There are hundreds, there are thousands of jobs boards out there on the internet. and ultimately, it's a CRUD app, right? Like it's not doing any kind of fancy stuff. And so, me, the persistent pragmatist, said, I can get this up and running the fastest using Django. And it doesn't need anything fancy. I don't need to use, React on the front end. I don't need anything crazy. I just need to use good old Django and write templates for it. And in that way, I can validate if there's a business need for this kind of thing, right? Like, do people actually want this product? Rather than dwelling on small technical decisions around the architecture of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, the pages are dynamic. So, as you said earlier, your personal website is static, so you don't need to worry about ever-changing content. But with a jobs board, every post is unique. But what's interesting is that you mentioned it just being a good old CRUD app. Mm-hmm. And I find that if you, as a software developer, understand the concept of CRUD, and maybe more specifically within Django, if you understand CRUD, then all websites should make sense to you, because it's just those actions repeated over and over again. So building something, I'm going to say, as simple as a job board is exactly the same sort of design as a blog or a to-do list or any kind of very simple dynamic site.
Exactly. So, I mean, it is the simplest possible, type of web application. And so when I hear the word web application, as opposed to, static content being served on my personal site, Django is one of the first tools that I reach for, because it's tried and tested. And I know it's going to work. And I know that when I inevitably have an error code, I'm going to search it, and there's going to be a Stack Overflow answer for it already. Right. And I'm not going to waste a bunch of time, trying to solve a problem that no one's ever come up against before.
So with Enviro.work, which project came first? Was it the job board or was it the community around it, which is, I believe,
Collective Energy.
It's collective.energy. Yes, yeah. That's it.
So Collective Energy came first. So Collective Energy is a community for people who care about sustainability and want to connect with other individuals, collaborate around ideas, crowdsource solutions to the climate crisis. And recently, I've actually seen it being used as an avenue for new clean tech businesses to promote their business, get feedback, find product market fit, get their initial audience, and even find potential fundraising sources through it. And so that site and that community was sort of born out of my desire for something like that to exist online, which at the time I just couldn't find, right? I wanted a community like that to exist. I wanted to be part of it. But when I looked around on the internet, I couldn't find anything like it. So I said, okay, this should exist. I'm a software geek. I can go and make something like this. And to my surprise, when I launched Collective Energy across various socials, Hacker News, Product Hunt, Twitter, it actually got a fair amount of traction, right? And it was at the top of Hacker News for a day, and got a big bump of 10,000 users or so on the day it launched. And so when you're trying to seed a community, that is a huge boon to your growth, right? You need that critical mass of users right off the bat. And so I had very low expectations for it, and that surprised me, the initial traction that it got. And the way that Enviro work emerged from that was people on the community started saying, wow, it would be really cool if I could find a job that aligned my personal values with what I am doing on a professional dimension. And so, I looked around and had the same problem, which is couldn't find any jobs boards focused on environmental jobs. And so I said, okay, well, let's just spin this off as an affiliated jobs board and just use this idea of community-led development, right? Where the people within this community are kind of pulling the products out of me.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to say that. It's very interesting because you started with your own internal need that you were looking for something, you couldn't find it, so scratch your own itch. And then from there, exactly like you said, it's just listening to what people have to say.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's this idea which is very popular in the indie hackers world right now of find your audience first, and then shut up and listen to them, and they'll tell
That's
you what
great
they want.
advice. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. I mean, I remember probably about a month or so ago, I was looking for what collective energy is. I was thinking, is there any sort of community for environmentally conscious people or that are just doing all sorts of stuff? And it's funny how the internet works when you kind of start prepping your mind for that and you start to adjust your lifestyle, and then magically things start kind of appearing in front of you. And this was just super interesting to me. And then Enviro.work was how I found, well, I actually saw it also about maybe a month ago, and then ironically found you on Indie Hackers, and then it just happened to be the same project. So that was very kind of strange how things align there. But they're very interesting projects, and I'm curious. So you started with the community, which makes a lot of sense. Um, how you talked about it already a little bit, which was Product Hunt, Twitter. I'm sure Indie Hackers maybe that you launched it there as well. Uh, could you talk about the process of getting users onto Collective Energy? Not so much the launch, but just the general process of how you approach that.
Yeah, great question. Community building is a huge challenge. And I will say there is no real other way to do it than the extremely painful process of inviting people one by one and making connections with them,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of direct outreach, and trying to get people manually to use the platform. And so when I was trying to seed the community, I looked to sites like Reddit for inspiration, right? And said, okay, so how did Reddit get to be the size that they did? Watched a few videos. At the very beginning, Reddit was creating fake users and seeding their community with fake posts. And I don't mean that in the way of, the content wasn't valuable, but they were creating different users and submitting content under those different users when really it was just, a couple guys sitting in their underwear in an apartment talking to each other. And so at the beginning, that's what I did as well, just to create a little bit of buzz on the community and to make it feel like not such an empty place, right? So that when people would come onto the site, they wouldn't just look at it and say, okay, this is a dead community and leave. And then from there, it got a decent amount of traction, organically from Hacker News and other sources. And then, over time, I haven't needed to do that. But there's somewhat of a chicken and egg problem when you're building a community, which is, people want to come on and see that there's other people, but they're not going to if there's no one there. So how do you get those
Right.
initial users?
Yeah, it's that's so funny that you said that about Reddit, because I did something very similar with the YouTube channel very early on, where I had to get basically social proof. You have to have some
Mm-hmm.
form of social proof for other people to then want to join. So if you can just get enough people to sign up or to subscribe, in my case, and get to 50 subscribers,
Mm-hmm.
that is so much better than 0 subscribers. Then it's unbelievable. Just that small number can, because from there it was completely organic. But yeah, it definitely is a chicken and egg problem. I think another example was Amazon, because when they started and just as a bookstore, their whole business model was to be the supplier, because you want to create a marketplace, so you need buyers and sellers. But in the beginning, you don't have either. So just be your own seller, provide the selling part of the marketplace, and then eventually, when it gets enough users, you don't have to do that anymore. So what you did, that's really interesting. I was hoping you wouldn't say one by one invites, because I'm starting to realize that that is probably the only way. Um, but yeah, that's still really interesting. So what would you say are the most challenging aspects? I'm pretty sure growing it was challenging, but have there been any other kind of challenging aspects of building both Enviro.work and Collective Energy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main challenge is coming up with a reason why people would want to keep coming back to the community, right? So you initially come on and you sign up, and there's a bunch of content that you can consume there. But ensuring that there's a consistent stream of new value is the reason why people would keep coming back, right? It's the reason why people use, Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, right? Because every time they click on that little icon, there's going to be something new for them to consume there. And so curating the community and ensuring that there's a consistent stream of valuable content, so that when they click there, there's something that will enrich their life and help them, is a consistent challenge of a community. In a similar way to, I would say, some of the curators of communities like indie hackers do, right? Like they're constantly kind of like prompting the community with new questions and new content.
Right.
And promoting creators within it.
Yeah, that definitely is challenging. I think, because I've just started building my own community, so I'm really going from the beginning on this now. And I think one of the things I had to think a lot about was how notifications work. It sounds really weird, but because it's exactly what you're saying, is how do you bring people back? And if you're not engaging with them when they're not on the app or on the site at all, they will forget about your community. So you have to like constantly remind them, but you also don't want to spam them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Indie Hackers has gotten the approach right, where they do the growth bites and they send that every day. So it's constantly in your mind that, okay, Indie Hackers, and continuously prompting you to come back.
Yes, exactly. I would say another potential avenue is kind of piggybacking off the existing places where your ideal audience is already congregating, right? And so for something like collective energy and enviro work, I thought deeply about the question, who am I making this for? And ultimately it came down to, I'm making it for someone like myself who has passion for sustainability, but also technical aptitude and, wants to go and build solutions, not just talk about them. Right. And so where are those people congregating? Well, they're congregating in the same places that I already congregate in, right? It's Hacker News, it's Twitter, it's Indie Hackers. There's other niche communities out there, right? Like there's certain subreddits that exist for things like this. And so, going and just generally being helpful within those communities, contributing to the conversation, and then kind of biding my time and waiting for, when the question inevitably comes up of, where are these things happening? Where can I find jobs around sustainability? Where can I find, commentary and collaboration opportunities and new interesting solutions around sustainability? And then chiming in, not in a self-promoting way, but just in a helpful way of, hey, you should have a look at this community and this jobs board.
That's super interesting. Are there any kind of other resources that you use to learn about this? Books, courses, anything?
I would say it's mostly been through, some of the blog posts that have been written by other, community builders and, I guess maybe SaaS builders within the space on growing communities, because community building is a huge topic right now, within the startup community. And there's a lot of content being generated on it in the form of, Substack or blog posts currently. And it's just trying to take the lessons that those people have learned and leverage them, I guess, for my own purposes and not make the same mistakes that they've made.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. Okay. So just to end off, so you do consulting. It's mentioned on your website.
Yes.
With the various technologies and expertise, or maybe I shouldn't say that, expertise that you have, and with the pragmatic approach that you take. What general advice do you have for people consulting? I know you've written a blog post, which is I'll link in the show notes of this episode, which is really good. Applies to pretty much, I'd say, different industries: software developing, engineering, designers. What would you say are just some off the top of your head, really good general tips for people starting to kind of either become consultants or starting their own agencies?
Yeah, great question. And definitely I'm looking to start, and continue to keep putting out content around consulting, because it's something that I've done my whole career. So I guess first and foremost, you need to shift your mentality when you start consulting, right? You are no longer, software developer number 3 in a business. You are now, strategic advisor number 1, and your customer doesn't care about the specific application of technology that you're doing for them. And I think it's worth, considering this point really deeply. Ultimately, the technology is not the solution here. It's about the business problem and the business solution. And the more you can reframe your thinking around the business problem and the business solution, the better off you'll be, and the higher rates you'll charge, and the more creative liberty you'll have to get things done in the way that you want. And really, the problem is that I see when people start consulting, they say, okay, well, I'm a Python developer, or I'm a Python consultant, I'm a Django consultant, I'm a Node consultant. And when you market yourself as a consultant of a specific technology, you don't differentiate yourself from anyone else on the planet who's, a general practitioner of that skill set. You then slot yourself into this mindset of, I'm just a staff augmentation contractor. And so the competition for that is just way higher. And where you can really start to differentiate yourself is, I solve X business problem for Y type of company. And that is much more differentiated. It's much more of a niche, and the rates that you can charge for that are far higher. And it gives you much more creative flexibility and the ability to start scaling your own time.
Yeah, it's such good advice. I mean, again, I advise people to read the article. It's so good. I hope you write more about the subject. Do you by any chance follow The Future? Because you remind me very much of that, of Chris Do.
I might.
That's great. Okay. No, so what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I have all of my contact information on my personal site, ericvanular.com. I'm not shy about putting my contact information out there into the world. So you can see it through my personal site, my LinkedIn. You can DM me through Twitter. If you'd like, it's not hard to get in contact with me. As I think you found, reaching out to me in regards to EnviroWork and getting me on this the podcast here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no worries. Pleasure to be on here. Thanks for having me on.